kind of core functions of two distinct pieces of work. And I know from experience that when you bind them together in one person, it almost always stretches their capacity to be able to fulfill the requirements of those things. So I've had conversations with many folk in the congregation and with staff, simply asking, what do you think is going to best serve the interests of Hillhurst going forward? Are we looking for one person who can do an impossible job, although it would be more possible if they had some assistance? Or are we potentially looking for two people to occupy one position, working in a collaborative fashion to try to address those differing kinds of issues? And I have had all kinds of really good questions and suggestions from folk in the congregation and the staff about how to address this. So this isn't about the answers, it's simply allowing opportunity for some more questions. So if you have some questions, I'd be happy to hear. Hang on one second.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. I have ADHD.
Hold it up here just under your... Yeah.
Yes. I'll try to go slower too. My question is, what are the logistical, human, and I guess other impacts of having budgetary impacts of one person versus two?
Well, there would be a bit of an impact. So one of the ways that you try to address that is you say we have one compensation package that we're going to divide between two people. So that would be one way of not kind of blowing out the budget. If you have one person doing it, though, you may well be required to have some assistance, and that might be like a day a week or something, just to take care of detail that is difficult for the person who's occupying this ED/operations kind of role. So the other thing that in your question that's important is we have to be mindful of the expenditure side of what we're talking about. So, and I don't know anything about that at the moment, so I guess that'll be revealed at some point. Any other questions? James?
That hiring someone half-time, we expect and begin to demand of them more than half-time. And it's very hard for them to say no. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration. And the other thing is, I think we lower our ability to attract someone who is really capable of doing some of these skills by only taking them half-time. Because most people in our society need a full-time job. And otherwise they're doing two full-time jobs for half-time pay. So it's a very complex issue.
Yes, that's right. And connected with that, of course, is the church always has to think about being a just employer. And it's not just justice in terms of time and compensation, that's important, but also what we can realistically expect a person to do. What the confines of their position will be. And it's, in complicated jobs, that's a challenge. It's difficult to work out. But thanks for raising that. Yeah. Dale.
Barry, when you talk about it and when you express all the skill sets required, it's a huge amount of skill set, and they don't necessarily complement each other. Mm-hmm. So how would you see dividing up the tasks? Thanks, Dale.
Well, I think that what I would do is advertise probably for two positions, but there's the question about whether that's affordable from a full-time point of view. So I think that you have to go with a person's strengths and capabilities, what gives them energy, and see what you're going to do with what's left. Because in my experience, one person doesn't have all of those things. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd say we're going to look for an executive director and we're going to look for a director of operations. They're going to work together as a team to serve, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But then you're talking about a significant level of expense. I think one of the great challenges we have in the church for anybody who's working for us is to draw healthy boundaries around what they do and admit that there are lots of things that one person can't do. And so that has you then looking at, well, who else in our staff complement might be able to look after this? Just to give you an example, and I'm not saying it has to happen this way, but internal, external communications. Well, we have a couple of people who are working on that. You know, maybe that's best left where it has been given, and so shouldn't be an expectation of the new ED. Maybe some of the finance stuff should belong with the finance committee and the treasurer, and doesn't necessarily have to involve the ED operations type person very much. So one of the conversations I know that's on our calendar to have in the not too distant future is precisely this one with the staff, is to say, well, you know, what is everybody doing here? And, you know, are there things that you can take on without creating undue burden to help lighten the load in that complex position? So it's a great question, Dale, and not easy to answer. James.
This is when I mutter something and everybody goes, what did he say? I think Jesus was a pretty good executive director, and he had a bunch of disciples who I think did some of the legwork. So maybe the issue is whether it's one or two people, there's got to be a resource behind to support and take the load off of these people. That wasn't a question really, was it? No.
It's what we call a comment in a question form. So yes, exactly. I mean, this is any organization has to look at this, especially in the church world, and that is how are we sharing around the work? Do we need to be doing everything that we've always done? Are there things that can, you know, go? Are there things that we can drop off because they're no longer current? I think that requires ongoing assessment, but that adds another level of complexity to everybody who's doing their jobs already. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Yes.
I'm Larry Pierce, for those who don't know my name. I was on the board for a while, and Anne was the executive director at the time. I guess a couple of things. One, Anne seemed to be doing an extremely good job under the kind of complexity that you have mentioned. I could see that from the board point of view. Has there been any conversation with her about some of these questions? How do you divide the job? How do you work this out? What were her experiences, and what would she recommend?
It hasn't happened yet, but is one of those things to happen. I understand that Anne is traveling at the moment. And, you know, for her, I think she wanted to have a time of separation from having done that job, which I understand became more expansive over time. And you don't find an Anne Yates LaBerge very easily out there in the world. You know, so this also raises the question of reasonable limits. So yes, Anne, you know, if Anne is willing to have that conversation, I'm hoping that we can do that soon. Now the question came to you, James.
Question or comment? Oh, it's not. I think in the corporate world, what you've just talked about is called an exit interview.
Yep.
It's also known as the and another thing interview, it's your opportunity for that person exiting to complain about the things that didn't go well, and that probably tells you a lot about what you need in the role.
I don't know that there was a formal exit interview for Anne, and Barbara, you're the chair. Yeah. So Anne declined, but if she's open and willing, we'll talk about the things that worked well, that she liked, and what her recommendations would be about how to tailor the position differently, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure she has some views about that. Question there in the middle, James.
How do I get to you?
Peter Kelsch, previous accountant for the church. In my experience with volunteer work and not-for-profits, much of the work is done by volunteers. I know that Hillhurst is large, and we've had growth. I just can't see that position or two positions within the budget of the existing Hillhurst church. So I'm just wondering if we can't get a board and volunteers to do some of that thought work and then maybe pay some people to do the grunt work.
Thanks for that. I think the answer is yes, but it's one of those things that you have to work out in agreements with people, and I think from an accountability point of view, there's only so much that you can reasonably expect of quote-unquote volunteers, so that's one of those things that has to get worked out there. Dale?
Just to add to that point, Anne was good at just about everything. And so what Anne would often do, would she would agree to take on an event, like when we did the Lights of Love and many, many things. And again, there's a point where we should be asking volunteers to come forward to do that. She was very good at it, so we let her do it. But it just made the job bigger and bigger and bigger. So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Thanks.
That's one of the impressions that I've had in talking to people. Great admiration and affection for Anne from everybody I've talked with, but a recognition of a strength also eventually becoming a weakness in the sense of capacity to perform, willingness to perform, but eventually then coming to the point where you say, and my table's got too much on it. So, yeah, so another person would handle it. Marcia.
One of the great things about this church, to a number of questions, is the volunteers here. Is there a expectation that as we grow, that more and more people that are joining are then asked to step forward? Maybe not just on the board, something as specific as that, but who would coordinate that? I know that it's sitting on Danielle's email list, and she's doing a great job, but is there more pieces that could be added to the volunteer roster so that we can help our staff who are doing a great job, but also use the talents that we have here in the congregation that we may not even know about?
I think it's the challenge of every faith community, and those are good questions.
I just wanted to add to that, in that as you're describing or trying to flesh out the purpose of of this position, what is the purpose of volunteers in Hillhurst? I think being a volunteer and a leader congregant is part of being part of a church community. And I think if you rely too much on staff, you start to have people who are just showing up when someone tells them what happens and that kind of thing, and they miss it being a really important, a part of their life where they can serve. So I wonder if while you're going through this process, you can determine what is the role of volunteers? What role or what part of the church operation is going to belong to our congregants?
Yes, that's also a good question. One of the things that comes to my mind is that we frequently aren't as reasonable as we might want to be in expectations with volunteers. So sometimes a person will step up with something because they're interested and they do a great job, and then we say, you have a lifetime appointment. And we don't want to do that because that prevents the sharing of gifts that others have. I don't have an answer really to your question, except, again, I think it's a process of ongoing invitation and preparation for volunteers, and we also have to be able to give people an appropriate exit strategy. So, like, do something for a year, for instance, and whatever. Yeah. Thanks for that. The comment was in part of our preparation for volunteer engagement that they have something like a position description that details the expectations, and that it also includes a way that they can exit out of that work after a certain period of time or after certain things are accomplished, and it's signed and kept on file. And I guess that then becomes something that is managed. The details of that are managed by the person who's doing the volunteer coordinating. And you underline something that's just important in the nature of communal church work, is there's always some work of administration. There has to be somebody who looks after details. In my experience, it would be easy to have that kind of document signed. It goes in a file, and then it's forgotten about. Like who's checking them out? Who's keeping them current? Who's checking in with the volunteers? How's this going? Is this satisfying for you? Have you reached the end of your rope or whatever it is? So that's a piece that has to go in there too. Marcia.
So again, to appreciate the great work that Danielle's doing, but there's also an app for that. We have a great way to sign up. We have a great way to track how we can help more. We can put more space and opportunities on that. So absolutely we need someone as talented to oversee that, for sure. But thanks to technology, there's a lot of the admin that is being done behind the scenes that is easy. And so yeah, you can pull a report or whatever we need from that.
Good to know. Any, Cameron, any questions from our online community or no? Okay. Any more for any more? We're at 20 to 1, so it's just about half an hour. I'm always happy to have any of you contact me directly at Hillhurst. Email barry.foster@hillhurstunited.com. And in another week or so, Danielle and I are going to work on this. We're going to send out, not a questionnaire exactly, but something to the congregation that gives everybody a chance to participate, to say, here's my question, here's a concern that I have, here's something from my experience that needs attention, etc. And so a lot of the questions that have been raised here can come back again with some detail. And one of the things that I look for and hope for are also your inspirations about, so here's a question, but here's something that I think you can do to kind of move that forward and so on. That would be really helpful. Well, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. This has been very interesting work, and I just want to say that everybody that I've talked to at Hillhurst is what I call realistically loving about this community. In other words, they know that it has great strength, but they also recognize there are holes in the fabric that need attention too, and people can speak about that honestly but affectionately. And I've really appreciated the expression of love that people have for this place. So thank you.